Hey guys, it's Brandon here, and in today's video, we're going to be installing this Chase Bays tucked radiator for the BMW E30 chassis. It also fits in some other ones like the E36, and this is their new design. If you watch one of my previous videos, I mentioned that I was waiting for this radiator since September of 2024. It finally came in. It is May right now, end of May of 2025. It came in last week. I'm super happy with the fit and finish of it so far. It looks really good. It has everything that I wanted on it. The 20 AN outlets here. Super nice how they integrated these. So what they do now, compared to their old designs, I believe, because this is the brand new one, is these are 20 AN. And then you choose if you want it 20 to 20 or 20 to 16. So I wanted 16 because fitting 20 AN lines in here is going to be kind of tight with the way I want to have this routed. But it leaves me the room to upgrade in the future. But I have 20 to 16 now, so they send you these little adapters. On the bottom here, I have an electric water pump. This did not come with this radiator. But this, I'm just kind of mocking it up here to see how I want to have it run. I think I am going to have it run right off of the bottom, which is going to be really, really nice. It's kind of how I was envisioning it. It does come with the fan shroud for a 16-inch fan, which I actually already have installed on this car, so that'll be perfect. I'll mount it right up to that. And other than that, it does come with mounting brackets. Now these are E30 chassis specific. Says it in their part number here. They do have other chassis available, so they'll send you those brackets. And then it also comes with mounting bolts for these brackets to mount to the radiator here, as well as 2 plugs, which on this side would go in here and in here. And these can be used to run different things. I'm actually gonna have my overflow run into one of those and unplug the other one. Or you can plug them both, they send you with both there. So in this video too, I plan on making this a really in-depth analysis video and install, kind of going over everything I'm gonna do, sort of like my other videos, and especially like the H&R spring install on the M4 here. I feel like with that video, I went super in-depth and just showed everything that you need to do, all the trials too and tribulations with it. So I want to do the same thing for this video. It's probably going to be extremely long, but it'll go over everything. And so in the video, we'll be installing the Chase Bays tucked radiator, a Stim Tech water pump delete, a Grande Racing thermostat delete, a Davies Craig electric water pump, possibly the water pump mounting kit, depending on how heavy this sits in the car, and running all the AN lines to make it work. We will also be covering in this video removing the stock, or this is an upgraded but in stock location radiator, as well as all the cooling lines, disassembling everything. On my car, it's not a stock cooling system. As you can see, I have the Chase Bays filler neck here, no coolant reservoir. I have no heat in the car or any of that. The whole system is gone. So all of those lines are out of there for the heating. I also have no throttle body heater anymore because I'm not running the stock throttle body. So I have the block plugged in the back for that. There's no rear radiator or head coolant neck coming out. I have a plug for that. That stuff's already installed, and I won't gloss on that too much in this video. It's really going to be more about removing the radiator, removing the coolant hoses, removing the thermostat with the Sora intake, because that is a little tough, removing the water pump and draining the coolant out of everything, and then how to install all of these parts. Now, all of these parts really kind of work in conjunction with each other. The only thing you really could install on its own would be the radiator, but it'd still be a little tough, in my opinion. The best way to do it, I think, is going to be to convert everything to AN lines like I'm going to do here, getting rid of the water pump and running an electric one, getting rid of the thermostat because the water pump can vary its speed to adjust the temperature of the of the coolant. So this is going to be just really cool. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is remove the front grills and the front bumper. Now this is a metal bumper with the plastic trim piece here, and then obviously the plastic grills like all the E30s have. So on my setup, it's pretty much stock. The stock cars will have 2 clips here and then a screw in here and 1 in here. The main kidney is held on by 2 clips here. Mine's just a screw. And then same thing on this side, there's 1 screw here and then a screw over here. If you've never taken your bumper off before, there's going to be more steps involved to get that off, but just starting with the grills is a good step. Now that the grills are off, the next step is going to be undoing this plastic fascia on this bumper. Inside the fender here, you don't need to put this on a lift or anything or jack stands. You can just move the wheels in and out. There's 2 bolts. You can undo those and then this will come off. It's also a good idea to take out the ambers here. Mine, because I've had this off and I did all the wiring, I just don't have these ambers anymore. But you can just unplug those if you take this off. There's just a little bulb that unplugs. And while you have the screwdriver out, it's also a good idea to undo the blinker covers here. So 2 screws there, same thing on the other side, and you just take those off. Also, before we take the actual fascia off, it's sometimes easier to remove the plastic here. All this that goes around the front, it's split into 2 pieces and it starts here, and then there's that seam in the middle. It's not screwed or bolted on in any way, it's just plastic tabs. So I've had mine off a bunch, but you literally just pull on it and then this piece just starts peeling off and then you can just take the whole thing off. Always start on where the wheel side is here. Starting in the middle is pretty tough. So now this front fascia is off here. You just pull it right off. It's kind of just held on by friction sitting in there because it kind of like wraps around the white crash bar here. And now you have a really good view of where these bolts would be. On my car, I switched it out to where it's just screws, so it's a lot easier. But usually there's a bolt here, another bolt here, and then also 1 down here. You undo those, and then the bumper is slightly free on this side. You're also going to have to undo a screw here, which these are screws from the factory cars. And if you've never taken your bumper off before, there's also going to be a screw underneath. That's a huge pain to get to. So we're going to be taking this white crash bar off here anyway to remove the metal bumper as it wraps around behind it. But first things first, I'm going to get my screws out there, and I believe it is a 17 millimeter from the factory. Just a little tip to get screws like this one out here without removing your headlights, which if you wanted to is pretty easy. It's only 1, 2, and 3 screws, and then they just pop out and they just plug in, so it's not really a big deal. But if you want to keep them in, what you can do is get a normal drill bit and a 1/4 inch socket wrench, and you can put the bit through and turn it like this, and this gives you great clearance. It's actually how I do the sides on here too. It's a lot easier. And after this, the bumper will be free. I just removed this side and that side, and I did that fender over there. You do not need to loosen up any of the other fender parts to get this off. You just have to undo this one here. Then my bumper's free, but remember, you guys will still, if you haven't taken it off before, have a screw underneath that directly opposes this one. And then we're gonna need to take this off to get to that. So to get the crash bar off, I've seen 2 different styles of bolt used. So the only thing this is held on with is one very long bolt that comes up through the bottom here, through these, and here's the top of it. So on this car, it's a 1989. It's been taken apart countless times and probably been in multiple wrecks. So I do not know if these are factory bolts, but they are a 10 millimeter Allen, and I just zip those out with an impact. Now, they don't usually get too corroded because of the bumper trim that sits on it, plus the actual parts you're unscrewing from are at the bottom. But if you did, you can always put some thread destroyer in here and then zip them out from the bottom there. So like I said, on this 1989, they're 10 millimeter Allens. I have a 1990 325 XI. That was a 55 millimeter Torx bit. Now both of the screws are out. They are very long as they go all the way up through, but they just pop right out. It's not a big deal. Then this is free to just pull right off. Now when you're doing this, be careful. These are screwed in, your blinker assembly here, you can see they're screwed in from the back. They attach to this. You're going to have a wire that comes in right around here. It kind of, on my car, it dips in under here and then comes around and plugs in. You can either get behind here with your hand or pliers and remove the connector ahead of time. You can see it there. It's just a pry connector where you just pop it on and off. Or you can slowly remove this and then pop it off and then remove the entire thing. Just don't go yanking on this without remembering those wires. So here is the front crash bar off. None of these need to be removed. Those are all just cladding on the back. The blinker assemblies do not need to be removed. You can see here, they just go through these holes in the chassis here and plug right in. Usually there is a press connector that you press and then pull it out. Mine are broken off, so I just don't. And now the bumper, there's two tabs, which I don't have on this car, but usually if you don't have a turbo set up already, there will be a tab behind here that goes up to a chassis brace, which runs along here. It's not a structural brace, so it is fine to remove if you've seen my Mishimoto install here. But there's just a 10 millimeter, the brace runs straight like this and then kind of just comes over a little bit. Right about here, there's a 10 millimeter you can undo. That'll unhook this side of the bumper. And then same thing on this side. Right here, you'll see a 10 millimeter. You can just pop that out and then this bumper should be free to come off. Now the bumper and the crash bar are all off. Here's what my car looks like with none of that on. On a stock car, you'd still have the radiator here. There would not be an electric fan. On like the 3/4 of this left side here would be for your AC condenser. Mine is already removed. There's also an electric fan on the front of that. That's a whole nother job I plan on getting into when I start making videos on my red car, the 325iX. That is fully stock, so I plan on making a lot of informative videos on that about removing a lot of that stuff and how to do it. On this car though, I'm running the Mishimoto radiator, an electric 16-inch fan, and a Mishimoto intercooler that's custom mounted with a bracket here. I am missing a chassis piece from the front clip here that runs along the bottom so I could fit this intercooler. And if you guys seen the intercooler video, I highly recommend it. I give all the specs on where to put all these bolts to run an intercooler like this and to where it centers up with the bottom of your bumper there. Also in that video, I talk about getting ready for this Chase Bays intercooler here. So I already know this should fit. I asked for the specs for it before they sent it to me because it was taking so long. So I made a little wooden box you've probably seen in the Mishimoto video. You remove the hood latch that sits here. You just cut that flush and you have to run hood pins or a latch somewhere else. I'm running hood pins, so I'm not concerned about that. And then I made sure that the radiator fits depth-wise in here and should also sit pretty much flush with the bottom of this and just fit in this circle or this square here. So what we're gonna need to do now is put the car up on the lift, or you guys can do this on jack stands. It's definitely possible. It's probably one of the easier ones to do, especially if your car is already turbo and has a lot of this stuff removed already. We're gonna start draining all the coolant. and then go from there. The next thing we're gonna wanna do is drain the radiator fluid. On this Mishimoto radiator and the stock radiator, it's on the driver's side here. There's just a bolt. This will drain all the fluid out of the radiator. This lower arm here, it gets most of it out of here, which includes this tube, runs all the way up to the one half of the thermostat. And this could potentially also get the, from the top of the thermostat to the top of the radiator. Most of that will go away too. So that'll get all this. We are also going to be having to remove a lot from the block, which means we are going to have to, on a stock car, I'm not gonna do it on this one because of the turbo setup. Over here on the side of the block, see if I can get any angle on it. It's pretty tough in here. Let's see. There it is. This bolt there. That one. That drains all the coolant out of the block, and I believe it is a 17 millimeter. With the turbo setup, it's basically like impossible to get to. Plus, it kind of gets coolant all over everything down here, the subframe and this transmission pan. If you're doing this on a stock car, I definitely recommend just draining it out of the block, as it's pretty much all coming out anyway. And I'd remove the transmission pan and then just let it fall off the subframe. But how I'm gonna be doing it is just removing the water pump. Obviously, we're probably also gonna be removing the pulley here, even though usually you wouldn't have to. I think I'm gonna. We'll see what happens, but if you crack the water pump, it'll start trickling down out of here, and I'll probably just let it run off the front of the block here. That'll probably be the easiest way to do it. The drain bolt size on the Mishimoto radiator is a 19, and on the stock radiator, it's just a plastic Phillips head screw. While this is draining, don't forget to undo your fill cap, whether it be in line like this, or if you have the stock reservoir over there. And you can modulate how fast it comes out by just holding the cap on and creating like an air barrier. That'll let it not just like puke out or cavitate. The next step will be undoing this hose clamp here and pulling it off of the radiator. That will get anything out that's in here that hasn't already been drained. Another way to do it would be to come up here and undo this hose clamp for this J pipe here. And then you can hold this up and it would force fluid down and through the bottom of the radiator. But I like just starting at the lowest point. So I'm just gonna undo this one, drain what's ever out of here. Because of how the thermostat closes in between here, you'll only have at most fluid from here in this pipe down to there. The rest of the radiator should have came out with that. Then after that, what I like to do is get this top hose off just to have more room, and then the radiator can actually slide out. If you still have a mechanical fan, you're going to have to brace it against the bolts here on that hold the pulley to the water pump. You put a screwdriver in there, and then I believe it's a 17 millimeter. You can shove on the fan and crank it off, and these are reverse threads, so you do go righty-loosey instead of righty-tighty. So that's how you get the fan off. They also do sell a tool for it, but I've never used it. So like I said, next step after draining the radiator and cracking the fill is going to be this hose here. So now this hose is off and basically nothing came out of there. Still take it off slow. But you can kind of just wiggle a little bit of it off and then let it pour into the pan. There's almost nothing in this. So the next step to make it easier is probably removing this. But I know on stock cars, this is a very hard hose to get to. So I think I'm going to take it off now. But if you're not turbo and have a bunch of stuff removed, you can leave that one on. And the other next step is going to be removing this top conjunction of hoses here. Now I'm removing this top hose. There's nothing in here as it did cycle out. You can see coolant still in the thermostat there. But what you're gonna wanna do is just bring this hose up to let anything drain down to the bottom of the radiator down there. There shouldn't be a lot in it. I just had a couple drops come out, but now this is all set. Now the radiator is free to come out, especially if you've taken the mechanical fan off. You can undo the Phillips head right here and here. This piece comes off and the radiator can lift right out. Now I'm going to be removing the radiator. I put the drain plug back in, tightened it down. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is I'm gonna remove my electric fan now because it's easier to get out. So I just have two wires here, just unplug them, and then these just pop right out. Also, by the way, you're never really supposed to use these as it damages the radiator fins, but I knew this was just temporary, and this radiator's going on my red car, so I'm not really too worried about it. So I'm gonna be removing the fan, which just comes out real easy. And then when you take the radiator out and you have the plug in, you wanna favor this side upwards. So you kinda wanna remove it at an angle like this. That way, anything that's still in the radiator doesn't want to come out of the lowest hose here. And if you left this one on, you know, it's got a pretty long way to go. Then just kick your pan out from under the car, and you know, once the radiator's out, tip it to one side and you can have a bunch of fluid come out of that hose. Now there's almost always gonna stay fluid in the radiator. I've taken a couple out. It's super hard to get everything out of them. So over time, if you leave it in a certain direction, eventually it will flow out to one of the tubes. But I'm just gonna be emptying it and then setting it aside. Now I have the radiator just chilling out here. You don't want to really lay it on its face or its back. It's not really good for it. So I just kind of propped it up against the bumper here. It's a good idea to put a rag in the bottom one here, as fluid, you know, will start dripping off of the walls and, you know, eventually soak up into that. And I also put one in here. If you didn't leave this pipe on, you could just shove one in the top too, even though that won't get as much action. And I'm just gonna kind of have this chill out here. A couple days should go by and it'll soak up stuff. And when you're draining it, there is still a pretty good amount of fluid in there. So just don't, like, you know, dump it all over the place. But now everything is all set. I got a big hole in the front of the car here. Next thing we're gonna be working on is taking off this hose clamp here. Then there's a 10mm right here. Same thing down here. It's a little hard to see. Let me see if I can get down there. Where are we? 10mm right here. And it is off of the back of the water pump there. So that bolt, that'll take that one. Then this metal pipe can come off. I have the spark plug sensor here zip tied to this. So I'm just gonna cut those zip ties. Then I recommend taking this off. There shouldn't be anything in it, especially because that has been drained. And the thermostat is closed right now because the car is not hot. So this whole section, there shouldn't really be any coolant in. There is still gonna be coolant in this pipe, and then you can obviously see the coolant still in the thermostat there. So like I mentioned, it's just a 10mm here on this first bolt. And I did forget about this. This is always kind of a pain to get off because of how this is tilted. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be like this. I don't think mine's just warped. But it kind of makes it hard to get not like a standard size socket in there. So you're gonna need to drop down to the 1/4 inch. That way you can get something in there. You can't fit a wrench in there because of how close these bars are on either side. So that kind of sucks too. But a small head on here will be just fine. You can zip it off. This side, when the car is modified, is easy to get to. Just that bolt right there. That one's pretty simple. I just zip that off with a wrench. When the car has full AC, that one's a huge pain, but it can still be done. Also just wanted to throw this in here because I don't have anything blocking the car right now. Here's a good view of what the front of the motor looks like with the turbo on the side, the charge pipes. I'm only running the mechanical water pump and an alternator. I deleted the power steering and I don't have any AC. So there's no pump for that. There's no power steering pump, even though I still have the bracket because of how the alternator mounts. It mounts to that bracket down there. So that's just like a good idea though of how this is gonna look. I'll get into it more once we start installing the new parts, but the drive for the alternator and the water pump is all one belt. The new water pump delete from Stim Tech, they actually supply you with a new belt to go just from the crank to the alternator there. So it still just runs off itself and you don't need anything else. The next step is going to be removing the crank, or not the crank, the pulley that goes on the water pump. Now these are 4 10mm bolts. They're not that big. You can zip those out. Now you're gonna wanna leave the alternator tensioned and this belt on and tensioned, just like it would be in a running and driving state. Because if you don't, you're just gonna spin this water pump over and over and over again. You probably could do something with the fan, the clutch fan, if you had that, put that on. But the easiest thing to do is just to leave it all tensioned up, loosen those bolts, and then we can detension the alternator afterwards. I have the 4 water pump bolts loose now. I can spin them by hand. This is still tensioned, and what you're gonna wanna do is get a 13mm, put it on the back of this nut here that is tensioned with this, and you don't have to hold this with anything. This can break free on its own. It's obviously a whole lot easier once you have the power steering and stock airbox out of here. I'm just running an extension, a long socket and an extension on a wrench. Downward is how you break this free, just standard. So you just push it down, that'll break free, and then you put a 17mm on here and roll this forward. You can see that it is teethed in there, so it'll just roll, and then the alternator will slowly release tension on this belt. That's the only thing tensioning this belt. The water pump doesn't have anything to do with it. So once you just roll the alternator down, the belt can slide off, and then we can finish taking these bolts out, and then the pump pulley can come off as well. I made a mistake before. This is a 19mm, not a 17, and you can just, with a wrench, just roll that down. Now the alternator is not tensioning this belt, so this belt can just slip right off, and then we can take the 4 screws out of here that are already loose. I also want to mention, because I forgot before, the alternator, to loosen it up, there's a 13mm down here. It's a big bolt that runs through. You can break that one loose as well. If anyone's ever done work on your car before, or you've had this off, chances are that is not tight enough, and you can always just roll the alternator. So I wouldn't go after it first, as it is kind of hard to get to with the power steering there, and just try to roll the alternator over. Mine, it's not loose, but it's not tight, and I could just move the alternator around. So the next thing we're gonna do though, is take this here. This is going to be a 13mm nut. We're gonna remove this. That will let us remove this arm here. It'll just slide off and stay connected here, but we'll just slide it off of this stud, and then we'll roll the alternator back over and you can just push it. So I just figured I'd mention this too in case you're struggling with it. Pop this before you take this off of here. Pop this this rubber piece off like this, and then move this all the way back over to here so you have the most leverage. You can pry it off, and then you can just bend it up, and then it's all free to just kind of chill over here. If you want, you can push the alternator back down. I'm not sure if it's necessary or anything like that. The next thing we can do too, if you wanted to, would be to take this rubber piece off. We're pretty much taking this timing cover off eventually, because we have to get to one of the bolts that's hidden behind it that holds the water pump on. So this rubber piece can slide off here. It's just these 2 little tabs, and then it just kind of peels off the back. If you haven't ever done the timing belt on this motor, this could be super corroded on there, and it feel like it won't want to come off, but I promise you the only 2 things that hold it on are these, and it just covers up the back of the timing belt, so debris and stuff doesn't get in there. Also, on a stock car, you'll have a wire channel that runs through here. There'll be 2 wires in there. One will be for an oil pressure sensor that sits down. I actually still have it installed, just not plugged in. Sits down here. Oh, kind of hard to see down there, but it sits down there right by the oil filter. So you'll have a plug that plugs in there. Also, the oil filter won't be facing down like that. It'll be facing into the exhaust there, but this is for the turbo setup, so don't worry about it. But you can unplug that, so then you can move it out of the way. There will also be that spark plug wire that I have up here that I had zip tied to my metal coolant pipe. That will also be in there. And these just run right in this little sheath over the water pump and then plug in. So you can just undo those. There will also probably be the crank trigger sensor in here. I actually have mine run underneath the back through here, so I don't really have to ever worry about it because I take this stuff on and off all the time. So that will also be in there. It'll be 3 wires. And you'll see how it's set up. These kind of just twist and come out, and you can remove that whole sheath and get the wires out of the way. So now is going to be one of the fun parts where we take off this coolant hose here, and this has coolant in it and a lot of coolant. The whole thing is filled. This is one of the hoses that always sees coolant no matter when the car is hot or cold, it just sees coolant all the time. So it's full, the whole thing is definitely full. You can see it runs right into the water pump. The only way to really, get coolant out would be to spin the water pump, but the entire block and head is still full of coolant. So you ain't spinning enough, to get it to come out of these holes. So what I'm gonna do is start here and take this hose clamp off and slowly get this off until we can let it drip into the pan below. I'm also going to leave this cover on because I don't want any coolant getting behind there. And you could pop the trigger wheel and the front belt accessory drive here off on the crank, but it doesn't really matter. Coolant can get on this. It's not a huge deal. You're just going to want to dry off inside the belt later. I think I'm going to put a rag down and see if I can maneuver this to where it won't get everywhere. Coolant will come out of this hose and it will come out of the thermostat. As you can see, there's coolant in here. That coolant sits right about to down there. You can see the bottom of the thermostat. So that's going to just be in there. You'll also have coolant on mine. It's modified, but there's a hose here that used to go to the throttle body heater and the back of the block. I don't think you could see it on this one, but in the very back of my block there, I have a little delete where a hose used to plug in. So you'll have to disconnect that. The coolant will come out of there. And then this is where the reservoir connects to. That usually sits right here. Whole bunch will come out of here. So that's why I recommend taking this off first. It'll drain all of that out. So when you go to remove the reservoir and the throttle body heater pipes, there's like nothing that'll be in those. So here is this hose disconnected, still connected to the water pump. You'll have all the coolant in the thermostat here come out. Now it's just below where the inlet is for this. You can avoid spilling all the coolant out of here by when you take this off, just tip the hose up. Then the coolant will just come out of the thermostat. It'll kind of ride along the rubber here and all feed out this way. You just really want to minimize mess with this. There's really no way of avoiding it unless you do undo the screw in the block to take that out. Which again, if you're stock, I definitely recommend it. There won't be any coolant anywhere. So it's super easy to do. But the next thing I'm going to do is I just have a rag in here to get some of the coolant and drain it through the rag into the pan. But the next step is going to be unplug all the spark plug wires. You can label them now if you know where they go. Each one of these in here has a number on it. So what I like to do is you unplug one, and then in there, let me see if I can see it for you. See that 2 right there? This one is for cylinder number 2. Cylinders in this car start at the front with 1 and then to 6. So cylinder number 2 is number 2. So you could just like either write on there with Sharpie 2 or put some tape around it and then mark it with 2. That way, because all these are going to be unplugged, they're going to dangle here. These rails are super like a nightmare to organize. it gets so compact, especially up in the front where they all meet. If you do it this way, you don't have to like undo the rail. You can just unplug these, leave them, and then know right where to plug them all back in. Like I said, they're all labeled. So this one's 2. This one right here you could see is 6. On the front side here, you can see that one's 4. So the labels all go straight across. So 2 is the top one. You could see the 2 in there. 4 is the bottom one, and it would be, this one's 4, it goes straight across. 6 is here, and then these, you could see the rest as you take them off. Also, right in the middle, I just want to mention the one that says ZS, which is this one here. That one is the one that goes right from the distributor to the Dizzy. So that's the one you definitely want to label, because that one will mess you up. So, you know, you could just write anything on that one, just so you know it's not a normal spark plug wire. All right, now I got all of these labeled and out of the way. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is grab an 8mm and undo the actual Dizzy here. So you're gonna take 8mm, it's gonna be this screw, and this one, nothing else. They won't unscrew all the way, like they won't physically come out of this plastic housing. The whole thing moves as one unit, and I'll show you afterwards how that is. So just undo them until like they just don't spin anymore, or they just spin indefinitely would be a better way to look at it. And you just do them all, and then it'll just pop right off. So I have 2 of these out right now, and here's what I mean by like where they won't come out. You can actually hear it not want to move, but it's totally loose and you can move it around. They just won't come out of the housing. So just get all 3 like that, and then it'll pop right off the front. So now the distributor is off, and I did drain some of this hose down. I just pulled it down now because there's a ton of room. Drain it into the pan. You won't get everything, only about to like right here. And then the rest of this will still be filled with coolant. So now though, before we start taking any of this off, I want to remove this hose clamp and take this hose off. There's really no way to avoid spilling this. So again, just rag everything up. And then take it off, the coolant will come out, but then that hose is off, and then we have unrestricted access to work up at the top timing cover here. All right, guys, so now that hose is off. I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the worst one to do, just because everything that is in the head above this point, so you know, the whole head, will come out. And it's nice because it's a little uphill, so it kind of adds a little bit of resistance, but it's still kind of just like little waterfalls. So definitely have the pan ready, have rags. It's gonna get everywhere. You can see there's drops here from the splash. I'm gonna clean everything up now, just wipe it off. And you can see though, everything in the head's drained. Thermostat is drained now, so this will be nice to remove. At this point too, I would have recommended taking the reservoir hose off and then, you know, letting some of that drain out, because that'll only drain some of the head because of the tilt. Then it won't like drain like and pull vacuum from the reservoir to come out of here. I definitely do that. But other than that, just let this drain a little bit. I'm gonna shove a rag in the water pump there just to get some of the coolant out, so it's not just dripping constantly. But the dripping does miss the crank sensor, just barely. So it's not a huge issue, and you know, I've gotten coolant over this whole engine before. If it gets on things, don't worry about it. Just wipe them down, you know, don't leave them overnight, and it'll be all set. All right, guys, so now the next step is, while I got a rag in the water pump there, is going to be to get the front timing cover off, just so we have more room to work with. So the first step to that is going to be getting an Allen. I believe it is a 3mm, but I will confirm. And undoing these 3 bolts here, and then this piece here will come off, and then this plastic piece here, it just kind of floats around here. That can come off right after this. It is a 3mm Allen, and these should really only be a little more than hand tight. It shouldn't be crazy. You shouldn't need like a wrench or anything for this. They should just be able to spin right off. These are also the same kind of screws that are on the distributor where they can't come out. So you just do it until they're loose, and then it'll just come right off, and then this plastic piece can also come right off. The next step is going to be to get the whole timing cover off here. So this, I believe on stock cars, is a 10mm. Mine, I had to use a replacement bolt because the other one stripped. I have an 11 on this. This is factory, it's 13mm. These bolts aren't huge. And also on a normal stock motor, you'll have a piece here that's for like lifting the motor out. I don't have that, I just have washers back here to keep the spacing. So if you have any kind of delete, or if you notice that your motor has been worked on before, keep in mind that if they have spacing back here, to not let these drop in to the bottom timing area there. And this piece here as well can be removed now. All right, so here's what the setup looks like here. If you guys were gonna do the timing belt with this, which is always highly recommended whenever you're working on the water pump, in this video, I'm not, but you know, usually what you would do is set the timing now that you know where everything is. You want to leave this bottom cover on because it helps with, it has a timing mark right here. This, that groove right here is a timing mark. And on the head, which I showed in the head video, there is a timing mark here. So what you're gonna do is you just spin the crank. This is 7/8 wrench will fit on this. And you line up the cam gear timing mark here with the head timing mark. And then you make sure the, let me find it. The gear, or the timing mark on the, here it is. The timing mark on the crank is correct as well. And you can see if I can get it to focus. In that groove in there, there is a mark. I'll get a better picture of it and I'll post it up. But right in that groove where there's missing teeth, there's a timing mark in there. And you line that line up with this line on this. So as long as this is lined up and this is lined up, the motor is in time. So I just put the motor in time now just so I can show you guys. So here's what it looks like on the head. And yes, it is much easier when you have absolutely nothing in front of you to do this. When you're looking at it from the top, I usually do like to just stick my phone down here and just confirm that that mark is in line with the head. You can see it right here. And then the crank one, which I'm sure most of you are wondering more about, it's right behind this groove. You can see there's a little O and a little T. Right in the middle, there's a line. You line that up with the mark that is on this bottom timing cover here. Now, if you remove this bottom timing cover, which you can't really do without taking the crank off, but there's also a mark lining it up on the actual crank itself that sticks out down here that the belt drives on. There's a mark on there as well to line it up, but the easiest way is just off of this. So you just make sure that and this are in time at the same time. Also, just for reference, because I'm sure some of you are wondering, this is proper belt slack for this motor. So you can see if I hold the camera here, I line this tooth up with the edge of the water pump. It goes up that far, down to the bolt. That's pretty much how you want it. A little looser wouldn't like hurt, a little tighter would not be good. But the spring itself is pretty much self-tensioning when you do it. But just to check to make sure, because I know when I was doing these in the beginning, especially when I first got the car, it was the first thing I did was the belt. I was super worried about it. So this is just a good little indicator, just so you guys know how tight you want the belt. So the next step has two ways of doing this. If you're gonna change the timing belt, you're gonna want to undo the tensioner, which would be a 13mm bolt right here. Crack that loose. You don't need to take it out, but you could just crack it. this will loosen up, the belt will loosen up, and you can take it off the top of the crank. I think I'm gonna do that just to, like, you know, show everything and have it done. But if your car already is, you know, in time and you're all set, what you can do is tighten this down even more so it definitely can't move, and you could just take the water pump out. This will stay in time, it won't really matter. And you could do it that way. Depending on who worked on the car last, if they're nuts like me, they will have tightened down this stud, which is a 12 millimeter right here, and that holds the bottom of the tensioner on. And you just have to crack that loose to be able to move the tensioner around, because even if you just crack the bolt loose we just talked about, it won't go anywhere. All right, now that nut here is loose, also you can remove the bottom timing cover, which I think we're gonna end up doing anyway, because I am gonna just take the belt off, which is just a nut down here. It's a little hard to get off with this here, but it's possible. You could do that, take that nut off, it's right here. That's a 10 millimeter. And then this can pop off, and you can actually just use, I wanna say it's a 13. This is a hex head here, this actual stud. You can roll it out that way, or you could just do it in the back there like I did. So this moves now, this whole tensioner. If I can do it, yeah, with one hand, you can see it. So what you're gonna wanna do now is push it down to tighten the spring, and then put that nut in again and tighten it up so this tensioner is down. This will relieve tension on the belt, and you can slip it off of the cam gear. Again, make sure the motor is in time, or you'll have to do it manually afterwards, which is a huge nightmare, trying to not hit pistons and valves. And then once you have the belt off of the cam gear here, you can then release the tension on this, it'll come off, and then this can come out. So now the belt is off the cam gear. Like I said, I just pushed this down, tightened the bolt. What I ended up doing was with one hand, I held the ratchet for this, and then with another, I put a ratchet on the end of this and just pushed it in. You didn't have to get that far. The belt just slides right off. Again, make sure everything's in time. Now's the time to go back before anything moves. And then we can just loosen this bolt now. This can just come this way, that spring can come out, and we can take the water pump off. All right, so now the tensioner is all set. So all you do is just loosen the bolt. I took it all the way out. Then the spring can come out and the little pin that's in there. You can actually push this all the way over and then just thread this bolt back in a little bit to hold it so now it's out of our way. And again, I can't stress this enough. If you're doing this, especially if you don't take the motor apart a lot and you don't really want to worry about the timing belt, replace the belt now, replace the tensioner as well. I will not be listening to my own advice. This belt is only 1 year old, and so is the tensioner, so is the water pump. So I'm not gonna do any of that. But I do plan on doing a video on how to do the timing start to finish on the my red car, my red 325iX. So that'll be like a full overhaul too. I'll actually probably have the front bumper off and everything again on that car with no radiator in it to show everything. So I'll have a full in-depth video at some point in the future going over exactly how to do this. But essentially, if you did want to continue with the timing, I'm not going to show it in this video, but everything's set up already, so you don't have to ever touch the cam gear or the crank again. You're going to want to just take off this plate down here, remove that. You can swap a new belt on, take the tensioner off, put a new tensioner on, and then it's just rinse and repeat from what we're about to go over with taking the water pump out and putting the delete in. And then it's the same setup. The delete has the pin here for the tensioner to still tension it, and then we just put the belt back on. If you're having trouble getting this 10 millimeter off right here, you can remove these bolts that are on the trigger wheel here, as long as you don't move the crank. It's hard to move the crank, so don't really worry about it. But you can zip these off with like an impact, and it won't ever touch the crank or try to move it, so don't worry about it. You could take this whole wheel off. It's just these 6 bolts and then the whole thing slides off. And then it's very easy to remove this. Actually, on second thought, I think I'm gonna take the wheel and the belt off. Just because I'm looking at it, I'm pretty sure when I take this water pump out, because the block is not drained, I'm gonna get coolant in there and I'm gonna wanna clean it out afterwards. So this will be a full timing video, just kind of backwards. So these bolts here are, I believe, 13 millimeter. I'll double check that right now. I'm just gonna zip them off with an impact or try it with a wrench first, but, and then zip these off in a star pattern. And it is keyed, you can see here. So this only goes on one way, you don't have to mark anything. And then it'll just come right off. Be careful not to damage your sensor here. If you need to remove it, it is an Allen bolt up here. I believe it's a 4 millimeter Allen. You can move that out of the way. I might end up doing that because it's gonna be right in line of where this water is gonna come out. But first I'm gonna try to get this off, and then we'll take this off and I'll show you what's going on. All right, so don't even try with a wrench, it's not worth it. Just take the impact. You can just impact those off. They are 13 millimeter. Then you can just walk the crank off, you know, just kind of jiggle it back and forth. Make sure everything's still in time. I have my crank moved right now, but it's still all set. You could just bop it off, and then we'll have access to the timing cover here. So now we have full access to the bottom here, and I'm glad we did. On the back of my crank here, I do have some coolant. I'm gonna wipe that off. So over here, I do wanna go over timing the motor again though, just making sure it's in time. This line here on the crank will correspond with this divot, and this whole piece doesn't come off. It's part of the, well, it does come off, but now we're not taking it off. It's screwed to the block through the back here, and you actually have to take the oil pump gear off to get it out. So this will stay, it doesn't move. So as long as this mark on the crank here is lined up with that divot, you're all set and the crank is still in time. If it moves, just line it back up with that before we put it back. But it doesn't matter anyway because it's keyed, but it's just a good indicator to know. Also, you could see all the coolant I have here everywhere from draining the other tubes. So it's definitely a good idea to remove this stuff. Take the belt off, clean it, clean in here if you've never been in here before. I have been in here a lot and it's kind of still a mess. And then, like I said, this is just a 10 millimeter. The only thing that holds this on now is just that, and then this just slides right off. All right, guys, so here it is with the cover off here. Again, it was just that 10 millimeter, whole thing pulls out. This is your crank, as we mentioned, with the aligning gears here. This is your oil pump drive gear. So there's actually, the belt goes around it like this. And there's a intermediate shaft in here, and then another shaft that goes down to the oil pump, which sits right in here, and just spins it around these 2 gears and shoots oil into the block up this way to the filter. So this, when you take the belt off, because I'm gonna do that next, you just slide it off of this, slide it around the crank here. It's kind of tight fit, but it goes. If this moves, don't worry about it, because there's no timing to this at all. It's just a drive gear. The only thing you want to be concerned about is the crank and obviously the cam here, but we're not really touching that anymore, so it should be all set. All right, so here is the belt off. Like I said before, this can just move around free, doesn't matter. It's just the crank you want to worry about. And I'm gonna be reusing this belt just because I'm in here all the time. I'll probably be in here again at the end of the year. So I'll just switch the belt then. And this belt is brand new. You'll see on here, you can see the ridges. That's just from sitting. It's not perfect, but there's nothing wrong with this here. Once you start seeing dry rotting in here, you'll definitely want to change the belt. It's on its last legs. And then in the grooves here too, these start out white, and then as the motor runs, they go to brown just because of like dirt and stuff. So, this isn't even that bad. I've seen it basically black. So this is pretty good. I'm gonna probably rerun this belt. I do have a new one, but it's for a different car. but I might switch it. Also, now is definitely the time too, if you're gonna switch to a Gates timing belt, that'd be pretty sweet. I wasn't actually planning on taking the belt off for this, and then as I got into it, just got carried away. But I think I'm just gonna reuse this belt, clean all the coolant up out of here, and then the next step's gonna be taking the water pump off. So that is going to be a 13 millimeter bolt here, 13 millimeter bolt here, and right there. So it's just those three that hold this on. And I'm also probably going to take the 4 Allen and disconnect the crank trigger sensor here. Now I have this disconnected, just that Allen there. I'm gonna cut the zip tie here and there and get rid of them, and then move this out of the way. And also, if you've never been in here before, this is magnetic, so just clean this off. There's probably a bunch of metal stuck on the end of this. So just wipe it down, especially after doing this with like the coolant and stuff. You just wanna give that a nice wipe down, make sure it's all clean. All right, so this is gonna be the big one. I already have this bolt out here. It is a 13 millimeter. All three of these are. You're gonna wanna disconnect the bottom one, then this one looser, this one a little bit tighter, so it kind of comes off at an angle to direct most of the coolant are down here. Now, the base coolant of the block is right here. No coolant goes below this point. The water pump is the lowest point. Now the head is already drained to the thermostat. So like right about here, there is no more coolant. The entire block though, from here to here, has coolant in it, and it's all going to come out when we take the water pump off. So the easiest thing to do is just take it off slow. It's pretty much gonna get everywhere. You can put a bunch of rags down. It's not gonna help. This one, it's pretty bad. Be prepared to get splashed, cover up stuff you don't wanna get hurt. But other than that, take it off slow to try to minimize the force, because the whole block, this whole thing is literally stacked up. I mean, this hole is huge. So it's stacked up the whole way. It's just gonna like force right out. So I like to just take it off slow and not remove all the bolts, and then just let it like try to waterfall down as much as possible in the beginning. So you can see here, I have all the bolts loose. These two are still in. I pop the water pump off and I can just modulate how much comes out now. I have a little bit in the crank here that I was trying to avoid that. But you know, that initial hit, especially popping the gasket, it's a lot. But you just kind of let it drain down, and it's probably not gonna take too long. But once you know there's not a lot coming out anymore, you can just pop the other bolts off, and then there'll be very, very little coolant in the block, and I'll show you what that looks like right after this is done draining. All right, so now the water pump is out. It didn't get super crazy, but you know, I don't like that. You're gonna wanna wipe that up pretty quick. This came out all right. The gasket has come off with the pump. There's very little on there still. So this is what I was talking about, the coolant left in the block. It's just from the slant angle here. These are your cylinders. This is number 1, so that's pretty neat to see. You guys let me know if you have symbols on here like this. I don't know what this means. It's a line, an 8, and then a like little roof on top of it. I've seen it a bunch of times on this motor, but I've never seen it on any other one. So let me know if you have anything like that or what that can mean, if you know. So I'm gonna just put a rag in here to get some of the coolant out. And if you do this over the course of a couple days, and not like all at the same time, this cylinder wall here, you'll get like a big white spot right here. That's fine, it's just the coolant that's drying. You're gonna wanna try to wipe some of it off, but it's really not a big deal. And that'll only happen after like, about 24 hours of it just sitting in the open air. The next step is going to be to just wipe everything down, clean everything off. There's no more coolant that's gonna be drained out of this. The entire motor's empty right now. We do have to remove the thermostat, but there will be none or so extremely little in there that some rags will just clear that up right behind here. So just clean everything up now, because we're gonna start putting on After we take off the thermostat, we're gonna put on the water pump delete plate from Stim Tech, and I'll go over that quick and how all that works and how excited I am about it. And then we'll be putting on the thermostat delete from Grande Racing, and we'll do the same thing there and talk about that. All right, so what we're gonna do now, before we take the thermostat off, just so that's all set, like I mentioned, we cleaned everything up. You wanna get it to where the coolant that is in here, if you didn't get it all out, isn't pouring out and there's like a little bit of a gap, like a little bit of a ridge here. So just so it's not, coming out. We're going to be installing the Stim Tech water pump delete. You can get these in 2 colors, a natural finish, which is like what the head looks like, the valve cover, the thermostat, just like a natural finish there, or the anodized black. And if they ever come across this video, when I bought this, they emailed me like a couple days later and said, hey, our anodizer broke. Would you mind just taking one of the other ones? And I said, oh, no, man, I really want the black. And they said, all right, well, we'll get you one. And it took forever to get, but I could not be more pleased with it. And I just wanted to shout out to them. They're awesome. And if they're watching this video, let me know about the dry sump oil system for this. I'm very curious about that still. So what we're gonna be doing is installing it. Basically, all it is a plate that goes on here, totally billet aluminum, machined. It's a beautiful part. They did such a nice job on it. It's 20 AN outlet here, and just the inlet standard bolt pattern. They give you 2 O-rings. One of them, the one that comes off of it, is an oversized O-ring. This is for if you have a warped block or a hard time sealing. You can switch out the O-ring that comes in it, which is just normal. You can see there's like barely any poke to it. Switch it out with the thicker one. I don't think I'll be doing that, as I've never had any sealing issues with this. If in the future we need to, I have it, not a big deal. They supply it with the kit. Also, there's a little serial number on it, which is pretty cool. And they send hardware as well, so you do not have to reuse your stock stuff. This is going to be an Allen, and it is probably going to be a 5 Allen because 3 and 4 do not fit. So I will confirm it's going to be a 5, and then we'll put this in. Also, the torque spec for these bolts normally are 22 Newton meters. So I'm going to torque these down to the same as the factory bolts, which is 22 Newton meters. Again, just make sure as well that your surface is clean. Mine doesn't look clean, but it is. It's all flat. It's very nice. And if you have like ridges or grooves anywhere, you can try to clear any old gasket material off with like a razor blade or something. But if you have like any gashes anywhere, you might want to just swap over to that oversized O-ring right now. All right, guys, so here it is on the car. I went until they're just hand tight, and now I'm going to torque them down. Again, it's 22 Newton meters. And I want to mention that before I said these would be 5s, they're actually 6 Allens. So 6 millimeter Allen bolts, and torque them down to 22 Newton meters. Start at any one and then just go across. So 1, 2, 3, and then go back to the first one and hit them all again at the same torque spec, just to make sure that one didn't get clamped more than the other. So it's all torqued down and on, and guys, I really just could not be happier with the fit and finish of how this is. It's so nice. Just a phenomenal part. I'll have their website and this part linked in the description, and I'm not sponsored in any way by any of these people. I bought this myself. They did not know I'm making this video. I probably won't tell them. So this is just a phenomenal part. I'm so glad I got it in the black too and waited the extra time. And I really thank them for making it for me. So this part is on. And like I said, it's a 20 AN outlet. I'll be reducing it down to 16. So a 20 to a 16. And you're gonna wanna get the ones with the O-rings. I'll go through that, at the later part of this video when we actually hook up the radiator and the water pump. Same thing with the thermostat. Now we're gonna tackle this and put on the Grande Thermostat delete. So now we're going to be removing the thermostat. With the SOAR intake manifold, it's pretty tough. I talked about it in other videos where I said like you pretty much have to take the intake manifold off. I have found a way to not have to take it off and run the Grande thermostat without removing it as well. I've had the Grande part on the car before, just testing it. So I know it fits, and I had the manifold on and, you know, swapped everything. So I also know this comes off with this on. It is a huge pain though. So basically we just need to disconnect 2 bolts and then unplug 2 connectors. So just this connector here, you just push this metal piece in and then unplug it, and the blue connector down below. And I'm gonna double check this, but if you're running a highly modified car like I am here, and I don't even have a temp gauge in the dash anymore, it's just an air-fuel ratio gauge. The brown plug here goes to the dash. That's what shows your coolant temperature on the dash. The blue plug at the bottom goes to the ECU. So you're definitely gonna wanna keep that one, and you don't need this one that the brown plug goes to. And you'll be able to tell too if you took them off already. The brown one is a single prong here, and the blue one has 2 prongs. And this one, I'm actually probably gonna get a new sensor, but maybe not, because mine, it's a little torn up. But here we go. I cut it off. So the blue one has the 2 prongs, the brown one has 1. So, and that's how these go. So you just unplug those, pull them out of the way. Then there's just 2 13mm bolts we have to get to. The hard one is right in here. It's that one. This is the one on the top. What you can do is you may have to disconnect your line down here. This thing with the hose clamp on it right here. That's my just block off line from where my reservoir was, because I wasn't running a reservoir. So you could take that off. I'm gonna try to leave it on, but it's just a hose clamp, and then you just pop it off. And then you can get a 1/4" drive mini 13 in here and then undo it very slowly. The bottom one, super easy. You can get to this one all day. 13mm, zip that off. And then this thermostat can come out. Now that is off. I did have to take my little delete plug down there because I couldn't get to the bolt on the top without doing that. So now that's off, just letting it drain into the rag. We can remove the bottom one and then get to the top one, and it should just come right off. How you're gonna wanna get this top bolt off is go in with a 1/4" drive, 13mm, a mini one, then a swivel bit, and then a extension. I just have like a, little 2" extension on here. And then you can turn it and break the nut free. And you can get this in here by just sliding it up through the bottom like this. And you kind of go through the big gap, and then it'll slide into the smaller one. So I just popped the thermostat off there. You can see that bolt doesn't come all the way out. Just take it right off. There was nothing in it except for on the thermostat closed side. In the bottom here, there's like a little hole that some coolant sits in. So when you take that out, you can just flip it up like that. And then in the drain pan, drain some of that out. Other than that though, we're all set. Just make sure everything's cleaned up to here. We'll put a new gasket on, and then we'll install the Grande thermostat delete. So here is the Grande racing part. This adapter and this 90 here do not come with the kit. I've had this on the car before just to test fit stuff, and I didn't want to take this off because it's on there real tight. So you have 2 bungs here for sensors. They're for the stock sensors. We're only going to be using one of these sensors. The other one's going to be for the electronic water pump temperature sensor. So we'll figure out which ones we need for that. And it also comes with 2 5mm Allens that will go through these holes into the block. This is going to be much easier to install than removing the old thermostat. before we put this in, we are going to want to remove the blue sensor. If you're doing both, undo both and then put them in here with some kind of sealant. I'll show you what I use, but I'm gonna just be undoing the one that goes to the ECU and then using the water pump sensor in here as well. Also, you could see here, right on the side, it says Leo Grande Racing, made in Brooklyn, New York. That's really cool. So to get these sensors off, it's gonna be 19 millimeter, and they do just fit right over the top, and you can just crank them off like that. I recommend putting it in a vise. If you're not gonna reuse this part, it doesn't matter where you put it. If you are, try not to clamp on the sealing surface here. Anywhere else is pretty much fair game. I have it on a bolt down here that I tapped and threaded to plug one of those holes. That's also a fine place to just grab onto anyway. Or like the reservoir part here, even though this is always kind of like a weird brittle area. So I don't really know about that too much, but you could definitely shove it in one of these as well. These are also normal thread, just in case, like if you haven't taken them out before, they're super hard to get out the first time, but they're just normal. It's not reverse thread or anything like that. All right, so the next part is going to be cleaning the threads up out of the temperature sensor we're going to be using. Remember, you want to take the black base one. It's the one, like there's supposed to be, the rest of it, but it's the black base one, not the brown single pole one. To use this, you only have 2 sensor slots, and to use the water pump delete kit and the thermostat delete kit, you need to have a water pump thermostat switch, or a temperature module here that will plug into the Leo Grande port. This comes with the water pump kit. It does not come with the water pump. That's its own unit. This comes with the wiring kit that I showed in a different video that came out before this, and I'll have that linked in the description on how to wire up everything to get the water pump to work and function as a thermostat as well. And we'll also be putting in the black port one out of the original thermostat, because this goes right to the ECU to tell the car what's going on. So what's really nice about the Leo Grande thermostat delete here is you can see there's 2 different size holes and threads in here. The water pump that are the temperature control module, the temperature sensor that came with the water pump, the electric water pump kit, goes perfectly into the bigger threaded hole here. And then the temperature for the ECU that we need goes perfectly into the smaller hole. So there's no need to run adapters or anything like that. It works out awesome. So here's what I like to use for thread sealing on coolant related parts, which these sensors will come in contact with. It's called Seal Lock Thread Compound. Try to read the back here if you want, but it's really, like, I've used it on a bunch of different parts of this car. I even have a delete port in the block, which I talked about earlier. See if I can show it here. Right there, that screw, I'll see if I can get it to focus. Yeah, right back there. That's off of the thermostat there, that port I had plugged up, the threaded one, that actually goes into that port. And you have to delete that once you get rid of a bunch of cooling system stuff on this car. So I just threaded that in there, just a bolt with this thread seal compound, and it's worked flawlessly, tons of heat cycles, absolutely no leaks. So I'm gonna be using this stuff on the temperature sensors. And what you're gonna wanna do is just apply this to like 3/4 of a thread turn, or just like 1 thread. And then you just tighten it down. The only downside to using this is you have to wait 72 hours for it to cure. In my case, it doesn't matter to me. But if you're trying to get, back on the road pretty quick, you might have a harder time using this than something else. But if you have the time to spare, I highly recommend this. So now I have it up in the vise here. It's not clamped down that hard. I got these in hand tight. So now I'm just gonna hit it with the wrench again. These, it still fits right over the top of both of them. Just tighten them down, as hard as you can by hand. As far as I know, there's no torque spec for these. And this is how I like that sealant to come out of the bottom. Just kind of makes a nice bead all the way around. and then you just gotta wait before we fill it with coolant. Now that both of our ports are installed, we can put it on the car. So you're just gonna get a new gasket. This one, I believe it did come with a gasket. However, I originally had it on the car. Then I had to take it back off, and now I need another gasket to put it back on. So I don't think I have another gasket in the garage right now. I have to go get one out of the shed. Just to put a gasket on there, and then those bolts go through, and then I'll get the torque spec. So I got a gasket here. We're gonna put this on the car now, and these bolts are gonna be 10 Newton meters. At least that's what the manual says, except every time I've done this, it's always leaked and they've needed more. So do 10 and then just do more. At least these are much, much easier to get to than the normal thermostat housing bolts, and you'll see once it's on the car, way easier time getting to these, but it's pretty much always gonna need more than 10 Newton meters. So here we go. I just started threading it in, and as you can see, there's just plenty of room to get really whatever we want in there. Same thing on the bottom. There's just plenty of room to do everything. And now you can see too why I had this cut down. This doesn't clear the SOAR intake manifold. You know, it's to be expected. This is an aftermarket manifold made to mate with a stock thermostat. This is an aftermarket thermostat housing, not really made to mate with a non-stock manifold. So you have to do some modification. Basically what I did was I cut mine down that far, basically to just where the tips show. And then you can bend these tips over this way and plug the sensor in anyway. It'll still work. And I haven't had any experience with it like coming off or anything. I'll see if I can zip tie it down as well. Or even, you know, just a dab of hot glue would help as well. That's probably the better idea. So, but for now, let's just keep getting this installed. I also just want to point out it's like perfect doing this because the wrench and then the socket extension it does fit perfectly right with the Sora stuff. It's literally just that plug. So everything else just fits up so nice. All right, so it's all torqued down now. It's way tighter than the 10 Newton meters, but you know, that's a good starting point. You can kind of tell when the gasket will start to like grab, it'll just start feeling good. So that's all set now. So the next thing we're gonna do, I think, is I'm actually gonna remove this because I'm not sure if I'm gonna need this or not. So I'm gonna just take that off of there for now. And then we're gonna start fitting the radiator up. All right, guys, so the next thing we're actually gonna do is get the front of the car just back together. We're gonna put the timing belt back on, then we're going to put the timing covers back on and set all the adjustments. And then from there, we'll start doing the radiator. So the first thing we're gonna do before we put the belt back on is confirm that the crank is lined up. So with this little point in here, make sure this line on the crank is in time with that. Then the crank is at top dead center. And the head camshaft gear here, the line on the camshaft is lined up with the line on the head. From there, we can put the belt back on. You're gonna start at the bottom, kind of squeeze it in around this and get it looped onto this. Remember, do not move this as it's gonna be in time. This, the oil pump sprocket, doesn't matter if you move. So you're gonna loop the belt around this. One side of the belt will come up through here, come in between here and here, and then it will come around the top of the cam here. Now the belt is on. There's still no tension on the tensioner here, so there's still a lot of play everywhere in the belt. So you're just gonna wanna wrap it around the crank first, run it up through here, run it around here, and get these teeth lined up. Get the teeth on the bottom as best you can. You can kind of like feel when you push this in that they'll line up. Then wrap it around the tensioner here, and then getting the top on around like this section right here is always a little tricky. But you can wrap the bottom around, and then this you just push on. Then I like to line the belt up and have some even spacing on each side of the cam gear. Same thing for the oil pump drive gear. You know, you're just gonna want some nice spacing on each side of it. You can kind of feel it with your fingers to see. You can't really tell with the crank down there where the belt is, but as long as the oil pump gear is lined up, it should be all set. And then same thing with the tensioner. You don't want it like way off on the side or pressed up against the little lip on the tensioner in the back. Just kind of right in the middle of the tensioner is where it could sit. Now what we're gonna do, and this should have been done one step before putting the belt on, but it's not a big deal, is you're gonna just pop the belt off the tensioner here and then move the tensioner to put the spring and rod in between the water pump or the delete here. It goes like this. So the flat piece on the end here will go into the water pump side, and then the tapered end on the rod will go into the tensioner. So what you're gonna do is just remove the belt, then put this rod in and push the tensioner down and tighten the bolt so it's in the down position. We can slip the belt back over and then just release the bolt and tension will be applied to the tensioner. So now as you can see, I have the tensioner in there, and then I pressed with the end of a wrench on this and then screwed the bolt in with my other hand. So now this is in the untensioned position. The belt, just make sure it's still lining up with all the cam teeth here, can just be slid right around on the side. There we go. I was able to do it with one hand there. Then again, just double check that the belt is proper on everything and that there's space on both sides so it won't try to walk off. Then we can undo the tension on that bolt, tighten it back down, and then just make sure you have good tension on this part of the belt here. And I'll show you what that looks like and make sure everything's still in time. Then we're going to turn the engine over twice just to make sure that the marks on the cam gear and head and the crank and case here come back and still line up. All right, so now the tensioner is all tightened down. I'll double check a torque spec on this, but I've never used one. You just get it really tight. It goes into the iron block, so you're not gonna strip the threads out or anything. Just use a normal ratchet. You don't need anything crazy like a breaker bar. Doing this hand tight and then cranking on it a little bit more has always been good enough. And here is the play I have in the belt. And now we're just gonna spin the engine over again, you know, just put a wrench on the crank, spin it like this in normal rotation, and see after the crank spins twice, the head should line back up where this mark hits that one. Now I've turned the crank over once. You can see I have the line in the right spot, and the line on the camshaft here is in the exact opposite of where the head should be, which is a good sign. We'll spin it over one more time now, and then everything should line up. Also, just keep track while you're spinning it that nothing's trying to walk off. Spinning it so slowly, it shouldn't really have any issue, but it's always good to just look while everything's open right now anyway. All right, so we've turned it around again. This is all in line in there. And now the cam is in perfect sync with the head. So everything spins all nice and free, everything's all set. Make sure you did torque this down. It's gonna be 22 Newton meters, but again, iron block, you're not gonna strip the threads. You can just crank on it pretty tough, you know, by hand. I wouldn't throw an impact on it or anything. But so just 22 Newton meters for this bolt here. Now we're gonna put the base plate back on that comes down here. That's just a 10 millimeter bolt that plugs into there. And then we can also put the top timing cover on, which will be 2 bolts, one here and one here. Now the first piece is on down here. This 10 millimeter, the torque spec is 10 Newton meters, but I've never done the torque specs on these. You just hand tighten it down with a wrench, and then it's always good enough. Same thing with the top here. These two, this one, the smaller one, is going to be 10 Newton meters. This side is 22, but again, I just put them on a wrench, hand tighten them down. Be careful with these though, as they are aluminum and you can strip the threads out of the head, and that really sucks. The next step here is going to be putting this plate on. This sits right over the top of this, and remember, don't put any bolt on here, as that's where the alternator arm connects. And then the only bolts that hold this piece on are right here and right here. All right, so the next thing to do is you can either put the crank plate back on down there, but the first thing I'm going to do instead is get the distributor all hooked up again. This is also a good time to mention that if you guys wanted to delete that engine hoist hook that sits right here, you are going to need to put washers in between this to keep the spacing correct from when that was there. Just a little peace of mind thing if you decide to do that. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to put on is this black ring here. This sits inside, and then this distributor piece goes on the crank. It obviously only goes on one way with the tri design. Now we have this piece on. Remember, that was a 3mm to put those 3 on. And don't worry, this still will just rotate around in here. This will be all solid. And the 3mm bolts here, there is no torque spec that I know of. I just, get them tight with just a little wrench like this, and then just crank on them a little bit. Just don't round anything out, and you should be all set. It doesn't really, face that much force. It just kind of spins around, so they don't need to go crazy with it. The next thing we're going to put on is the distributor here. These are 8mm. There's also no torque spec that I know of. Again, you just get them hand tight with a wrench like that, and then crank on them a little bit, and it's all set. Remember that the piece we're screwing into is aluminum, so that you can strip the threads out pretty easily. So you don't want to go too crazy. Just a small, like 1/4-inch drive wrench like this will give you plenty of force you need on it. So that will go on facing like this. And then when you're putting it on, just make sure that this seats properly. It pretty much should be fine anyway, but you never know if you have it like out of whack like this. That's not how you want it. You want to have it on like this, and then the distributor can go right over the top of it. All right, the next thing to do just to button up the top here is going to be to plug all the spark plugs and the distributor plug back in. So remember, in here, they're all labeled. Like 2 here at the top would go to this one, 2. The next one, 4, would go to this one. So they always go over. And this middle one here is the one that goes from the coil pack there. Now that's all settled up in there. The next thing we're going to do is going to be putting on this rubber piece, which protects getting debris in from the back of the timing cover here. So this slips on. It'll go on like this. These 2 pieces in the front, if you remember taking it off, you pull them up. They go around these 2 protruding tabs on here, and they're like the exact size of those tabs. And you can see there's a little lip that they fit in. So if you put those on and then bend it around, it should lock right into place. And then you can kind of feel with your finger down here where this kind of clip goes in. It kind of just sits in this gap right here, and you can feel that. So just be in mind of that. Now this rubber piece is all on here. You can see it like form fits perfectly around like the head and all that. So you'll know if you have it on right. But also, like I said, these tabs are like the exact same size. So as long as those line up, you're all good. You can just kind of feel in there, make sure it's all press fit into everything and all set. And now the next thing we're gonna do is put the crank wheel back on here. So it is keyed, so you don't have to worry about where it goes in relation to the crank. There is a little hole right here, this little pinhole, that will line up with the pin on the crank. So you could just slap that right on, it'll only go on one way. You can also then verify the timing of the motor one more time by lining this line up with this line on the crank. Here it is right there between the O and the T. And the torque spec for these bolts are 22 Newton meters. It's nothing crazy. You could probably do that with just a wrench and then just hit it with the torque wrench just to check it. So now I have the damper on here, and I just want to mention as well that I've never had to hit this with a hammer to get it on or off. I've always been able to just walk it on and then walk it off. So if you're having to hit it, just be careful and see if something else is the problem first, because I've never had any kind of clearancing issues. Now that all the bolts are hand tight in there, I'm going to tighten and torque them down. And you're going to want to torque these down again to 22 Newton meters, but also you're going to want to do it in a star pattern, just like you'd take a wheel on and off. So where you'd start up here and then down, across, 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 across. Doing it that way, just make sure that the damper's on straight and true. So just like you would a wheel. All right, so now that the damper is back on, the next thing we got to hook up is going to be the crank sensor here. So this wire, remember too, this is magnetic, so just wipe it off before you put it back on to make sure there's no magnetic stuff attached to it. Which we're gonna do here is this wire. Even though my harness is pretty modified, this wire does standard run right around where these holes are, and you would have had a sheath where it goes. And then it just clicks in there, and then it's a 4 Allen. And as far as I know, there's no torque spec for this. You can just get it hand tight and then crank on it once. And remember, it is aluminum, so don't go too crazy as you can strip the threads out. The next thing we can do is take and bend the alternator arm back over around here, and then you can put this nut on but keep it loose. Also keep the alternator in the untensioned position. We will be putting on the Stim Tech supplied alternator belt so it doesn't go to the water pump anymore. It's just a direct link from the crank to the alternator. All right guys, so what you can do is in the alternator in the fully untensioned position, you can get the pulley belt on first, spin it around on the bottom here, and then you can sometimes muscle this over, but as these are brand new belts, they're not worn at all, so it's a little tougher. But now that it's in this position, you should be able to just spin the motor over a little bit, remember, in direction of rotation. So you want to spin it this way, and it should just pop right on. If you did really muscle it, you definitely could get it, but I think I'm just going to spin the motor. Now the belt is on fully. We can take the 19 millimeter, tension back down the alternator, then you can tighten up this bolt here that we loosened earlier, that tensions this down and keeps it in one spot. You can also tighten this bolt down here, and if you had to loosen this earlier, tighten that down, but usually they're greased up enough to where you don't have to loosen them, so I didn't show that in the earlier part of the video, and I did mention that. So just those 3 if needed, at least these 2, which are definitely needed. And they can just be hand tight, and a couple cranks on them. Just remember all these pieces are aluminum, so don't go too crazy as you don't want to strip anything. So here's what this looks like all done. Everything's torqued down. Here's the tension I have on the belt. It's pretty tight. So everything's all set there. And now the next step, as we're all set with these installs, is going to be putting the Chase Bays radiator in. Like I mentioned, they did update their design with these new tabs here. And I had documents from the previous one, and I'm not sure it's gonna fit perfectly. So the overall radiator design's the same. The tabs are now mounting different. Originally, they came off the side of the radiator and were just mounting here. What I think I'm gonna have to do, but I'm gonna have to double check, is actually trim this off here on each side to mount the tabs to. And so we'll go from there and see what happens. We'll do some mock-up fittings right now. All right, guys, so the next step is gonna be mocking up where the radiator goes. But first I wanna get my fan mounted up. So they sell the backing plate that comes on here standard. It's for a 16-inch fan. Unfortunately, I have a 16-inch fan and it does not fit. Now they do sell their own fans and I'm sure those fit just fine. But if you look at mine here, I can get these holes to almost line up, they're very close. I could just drill the plastic out. But on the bottom, where the mount would go, it's not close at all. So what I think I'm gonna do is get a piece of aluminum and have a bar just come straight up between these holes here on each side. Then I can riv nut in the bar and mount the fan to those bars. All right, so I found this scrap piece of aluminum I had. It's about 24 inches long and it's an 1/8 inch thick by 2 inches wide. And what I'm gonna do is just cut it in half and then screw it into there. And then I'll mock where the fan needs to go. And then I can riv nut into this and screw the fan on. So I'll have that piece of aluminum, half of it on each side running up and down. You could also, if you have a smaller fan, run it across, but you're blocking a lot of airflow now that would usually go, through the radiator. Running them up the sides really doesn't block that much, and it almost gives a better transition, like how this shroud does. It shrouds it more into the fan. Also, I just, always take measurements of everything. The measurements between these holes up and down are going to be 8 and about 5/8. Right there, middle to middle, 8 and 5/8. Let me double check on this side as well. Yep. And then across is going to be 15 and 1/8, middle to middle. So you double check on your fan if this will work for you. If not, I'm sure the ones that Chase sells do fit this. I got this fan really cheap from Ireland Engineering, and I already have all the wiring set up for it. So I'm just gonna make this one work. So I got these pieces all cut up now and installed. Coming down from the top, it's gonna be about 1.75 inches from where I did it. And then in, it's about, now I'm mocking up the fan where this is gonna sit. Just gonna put a little Sharpie mark in there and then drill these out as well and then riv nut them. So here's what I ended up doing. I got the plates on here where these screws to mount the fan that would fit go in here and here. And then I have riv nuts where my fan is going to mount to. And how I did this was I just drilled the hole, riv nutted them on and left them full length. Then I was able to remove this by removing these 10 millimeters. There's 4 of them that hold the shroud on. And just drilled holes where the riv nuts would poke through. So now these just line up just like that and fit in there. And then I can just screw these on, screw my fan to it, and everything just works out perfect. Now the fan is all mounted up. I just, ended up using just little 10 millimeters into the riv nuts here, so it's all set. Here's what it looks like. It's floating above the radiator here, which is good. Don't want anything to hit. This is a pull fan. These don't have mounts for a push fan. So if you're gonna do that, you'd have to mount this some other way, like how I was using with the Mishimoto with the pieces that come through here. I'm also missing one tab that I'm gonna have to find, but this is super secure now. You can pick up the whole system and nothing's happening. And it's still all lightweight, with all the aluminum and everything. And my wiring is also in the correct spot. So everything should be good now. I'm gonna start mocking it up and see where it's gonna land. And I'm probably gonna have to cut a little bit more off of the car as they change the design slightly. So now I have my intercooler off, just so I can test fit this a lot easier. So I just put it over there, no big deal. I'm thinking from fitting, I might have to move or add new riv nuts over, or like maybe another inch or so. This side might clear. The car is a little bit like tweaked, it seems. And the radiator, I want it to sit flush in here, like right with these. And right now, this side sticks out like about 1 inch to 1/2 inch. This side's pretty good, but it's still coming a little bit, so we'll see what happens. But I'm gonna start mocking it up If you want to see how I got it to this point, I'll have another video linked in the description of mounting up the intercooler for this. Also, like I mentioned before, I did have like specs for this radiator, but they were from an old design because I had to wait so long to get this one. And the specs I used allow it to fit in this space here. So that old video works if you manage to get an old version of this radiator. The new one, though, it looks like I am gonna have to trim more of this off and some of this off here. So I'm gonna get ready to do that now and then mock it up and then see how it is. Before we start cutting and mocking it up though, I do wanna put the supplied brackets on. These are actually what's new. They didn't used to have these before. The old style just had tabs that came off of the side. But I think I'm gonna utilize these brackets. So each one, you can see, you have to tell them what car you're gonna use it on. So this one, as you can see there, it's for the E30, and then it says radiator and then right. So right side, when you're looking at it, would be the right. The other one says L on it, so it would be on the left over there. You can also see on these brackets, this is the left one here, the supplied screws that come with it fit perfectly in the up and down slots, but do not fit in the side to side slots. So the up and down slots are what mount to the radiator. So this one here would be the left side, and it would mount with the words facing in like this. All right, guys, so I have good and bad news here. So the good news is that the cuts I made in the previous video showing how to install this in the intercooler worked perfectly fine. The radiator fits in here. And these brackets, having them on like this, like we just talked about, if you push this up and push it against there, you'd have to, put some riv-nuts in there to secure it down. But that would work just fine. And then it's perfectly flush on this side, so that's where it's supposed to go. The problem now, though, is that these intercooler brackets that I had are in the completely wrong spot now. So the intercooler is going to have to be pushed way forward, which I'm not super happy about, but what are you going to do, So I'm going to get the radiator mounted up now, and then we're going to redo some of the plumbing for the intercooler. So what we can do to mount this up is in here, you'll see there's already a hole in this line that comes down. We can utilize this hole and put a riv nut in there. And there's that hole on both sides. Then if you put this all the way up to the top, it will line up basically perfectly with that hole. Made a Sharpie mark for the top one, we'll have to drill out. And this side works the same way, where the bottom one we can use already, and then we just have to drill the top one. And it'll mount right up and it should be pretty flat. All right, guys, I've done a couple more mock-up things to the radiator too. I think as we saw, I put the fan on with the shrouding extension here. I have the Chase Bays raised filler neck mounted up now. This is a 20 AN to 20 AN, and you can buy it from Chase Bays with this adapter on it, and then whatever other adapter you want on the end. They have a 16 AN like I'm running. They also have 20 AN and then a hose outlet as well. I didn't have this adapter, so I had to get it on Amazon, and I'm just running an O-ring between here and here. So that's all set now. 16 on the end. I have my water pump mocked up on the bottom here. This is a 20 AN to 16 AN for the water pump inlet, and then the water pump outlet is 16 AN as well. So I just have that mocked up just to see how that'll look and how it'll fit in the car, and it seems like it's gonna work just fine like that. It also seems like it's plenty strong enough for the water pump to hold right off of the radiator. Initially, I had a water pump mounting with rubber grommets on it, but I don't think I'm gonna be using that, especially because of where the water pump, how low it sits with this radiator. So we'll see after we install it and run the car for a little while to see if it like moves around a lot. Because my main concern would be it's going to try to break these welds, but they seem very strong and in the spot it's in with how the metal is cornered here and how big this inlet actually is and how not really too heavy the water pump is. I think it should be okay. but I was just doing this right now to mock it up. It seems like it's gonna fit in here just fine. Have everything off in the front still. And I also cut right here so the chase bay's inlet can fit in here. On my car here, the inlet was like touching this piece, and this piece isn't structural. So I just chopped this part out. Everything else can stay. This is where the latch was. So I'm gonna just mock the radiator up again. I also believe, how I mentioned before, we're gonna be using this hole here and put a riv nut in it, and then drill another hole and put a riv nut up there. Same thing on the passenger side, you're gonna be using this hole. I think I'm gonna use M10 bolts. Yeah, I think I'll be using M10 bolts with M10 riv nuts. So I gotta just drill this hole out here and then put one in. And I think I'm gonna use the long M10 bolts here. And to do this, I'm gonna just put them through and it's gonna screw right through the riv nut. And then the bolt should be long enough to where it can actually come all the way throughout the back. And then with both of them sticking out like this, I'll put a piece of steel here with 2 holes in it, and then also bolt the steel to the back. This way the radiator has really good grabbing points on here instead of just being riv nutted into the chassis. It's like secured to the entire part of the chassis on each side here. That way it can should easily be able to hold the water pump off of it as well. It would make the first point of failure, instead of these aluminum bracketry and then just these threads on here, would actually be the welds down here that hold on this outlet on the radiator. So the holes for the M10 riv nuts are going to be 35/64. I used a step drill bit to do that, so it was really easy. I'm gonna mount this up, mock the radiator up, and see how it is. And then I also wanted to get some measurements for you guys up here. If you want to just preemptively cut this to make sure your chase bay's radiator neck will work. Here's what the measurements are here from this edge over here. It's gonna be about 1.5 in, and then the opening is gonna be about 2 inches wide. So now I have the radiator just mocked up to the car. I put those 2 riv nuts in, and I'll show you after I take this off. But I put the riv nuts in the bottom holes on each side, and then just shoved the screws through. So here's what they look like coming out. Plenty of room there, actually probably more than I need. I might be able to switch down to a shorter one. These are perfect as they actually come through this hole already on the bottom here on each one. The other one, I believe we're gonna have to drill our own hole for them to come through. And I also, because the screws were so big, and I'll show you after I take it off, I had to drill out this hole here. So just in the middle of each one on the bottom, I just took the step drill bit and just drilled it out so I could fit this bolt through it. And I'll show you guys that after I take this back off. So here's pretty much what it looks like where it sits there. What's nice is I have this mounted all the way down right now. So what you can do is after you get this mounted up, you can loosen these bolts here, the bracket bolts, and then push the radiator up to where it hits the top of your cowling here, that'll give you the maximum amount of ground clearance. So here's what it looks like just on the car mocked up now. Pretty much just like their product photos, even though this is the new design. Looks really nice. Here's where my filler cap sits. As you can see, that's how it sits in there. I know on their website, it was showing that it sits over more. Maybe that's with another adapter in here or the one they sell. But mine sits right there, so it's definitely necessary to cut that out, but I think it looks just fine. And here's how I just have this roughly mocked up. The water pump is not tight yet, so once I tighten that down, I'll see where this is gonna be. But pretty much no matter what, I can use either a 90 or a 135 degree, which I also have, no matter where the water pump ends up, and get over to this 180 degree that I run off of the Stim Tech plate there. I was thinking about doing something different than the 180, but this just seemed like the most logical choice. The other ones, like the 135 degree, like point right at this, it doesn't really work. So this seems natural. And you should have enough bend here to where if this does end up being the final like place where this is, the AN line should be able to easily just curve right around. I also have coming are two shorty 90s. I think you're gonna need the short ones because I was looking at some photos that Leo Grande sent me of how they have their electric water pumps hooked up, and they keep theirs down in here, which is a pretty cool spot for it, but I didn't want to run all that AN line. So I'm just shoving mine at the bottom there, and we'll see how that plays out. But what they did in one of their photos is they have a full length 90 coming off of this and a full length 90 off of this, and the AN line is like this big. And that works, but I'm not confident enough in making my own AN lines to do that and not have like leaks there. So I got some snub nose 90s that should only come out to like here on each one. And that'll probably double my, or how long that line will be, and hopefully give me just a little more slack. Here's a good shot too of the bottom while it's mocked up. You can see the bottom of the water pump there. It hangs just below the bottom of the radiator, but it's just hanging below my charge pipe as well, but nowhere near the bottom of the oil pan, which would obviously be the first thing to go in case you hit something. So really no worry about destroying the cooling system on this car, as you'll just blow the motor first anyway. All right guys, so now I got the second hole drilled on each side, so I can put a riv nut in this one here, and I also drilled through it with a longer stepped bit instead of just the fat one. So now I can throw the bolt through where the riv nut would go. And on this side, it's got just enough to come out. So I should be able to put that plate on like I intended. And then that should give this thing really, really good structural support. I'm also going to attempt to bend the brackets a little bit and actually widen them out. So I'm gonna bend it this way and then this one to just be flat again. That way I can sit this back a little further as I mocked up the intercooler, and right here is where I want it to be. Right here at the end is probably where I'm gonna have to have it. So it's gonna be some tough work trimming the bumper to make it fit and then still look good, but I'd rather have the radiator in and then the intercooler just work around it later than having the intercooler in and doing a ton of work on all of this to make the radiator work. So I bent these out a little bit. It should give me that little bit of depth I need for the intercooler. And then you can see here too how I just drilled out the middle of those slots. That way the bolt can fit through and there's still plenty of play. So I'm just gonna use a washer on the bolt and it'll just hook up just like normal. All right guys, so I realized I'm just an idiot. So I was bending these to try to get some more room and it worked, but now some of my holes don't line up, so I'm gonna bend them back. But then I realized the intercooler isn't hitting on this. It's hitting on the radiator because their intercooler sits down here. So all I need to do is use longer bolts here, and I can put washers, or depending on how far back I need to go, metal plates between the radiator and the bracket to effectively push the entire radiator back. Now, I don't have tons of room. There's probably a good 1.5 to 2 inches down here, and I don't really want to get, closer than that, especially over here I have even less. But, if I could go back even 1/2 inch, that would make, a world of difference in the front of the car here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bend these brackets back so you don't need to do any kind of that stuff. You still do need to enlarge these holes if you're going to use bigger bolts like I am. But you don't need to bend them at all. You can just bolt them right up. And then just space the radiator back using washers and extended bolts, because these are really tiny. They're only like this big. So what I've done now is I made some spacers. This is 1/8 inch thick aluminum, and I made 2 for each side. So what I did was I just measured where the holes will go, put them on, and now I can stack them up, 2 of them, and with longer bolts. And this will let me push the radiator back 1/4 inch. And then if I need more, I'll just make more. So what I think I'm gonna do now is see how it looks and mount it up. And to give the specs on these, they are 2 3/8 long. And the holes are spaced at 5/8 and 7/8. 1 and 7/8. So here's what it looks like with 1/4 inch spacers installed in there. So 2 of these together are 1/4 inch. So it's a 1/4 inch push back. It will clear this now, if you guys didn't want to cut that and use spacers. Everything down here with the fan, even with the extra 1/8 inch I have with the fan, would work. And looking at how these AN lines would go, you'd still have plenty of room there. So what I think I'm gonna do, because the intercooler is not quite right in the perfect spot, I won't be able to get it back to where I was, unfortunately, but right now it's sitting about right here, the holes. If I go another 1/4 inch back, I should be in a really good spot, should be able to make something work. So I think I'm gonna make 4 more of these and then space it out another 1/4 inch, so it'd be a 1/2 inch space back, and see where that sits. So here's what it looks like with a full 1/2 inch of spacer. Right here you could see we have a full 1/2 inch, 4 1/8 inch pieces shoved in between there on each side. It's a lot better fit for the intercooler that I was just putting up there to see. It's still not perfect where we want it, but I really don't feel comfortable going back any farther. The AN line is going to run pretty much right in here. And it's kind of hard to see on camera. It'll be better once I run the lines later. There's not really a whole lot of room in terms of like back and forth if anything were to move. And this radiator, because of how it mounts, even with the supports I'm gonna put on the back, I think it's always going to slightly tilt. You can kind of see it, especially up in the reservoir here, you can move it. So I don't want anything like banging into the radiator or the intercooler either. So with how this is set up, how it's a little offset, you could see this side's much thinner than the plate over here. The bolt hole right here actually hits right here on the intercooler, and this side goes inside of it more. So the intercooler can actually be tilted like this in the car, and I don't want that. So we're gonna have to move the intercooler out probably to like right here. We'll put new riv-nuts in and then start mocking up and trimming the bumper for that. So now I have the bumper back on the sides there. I just shoved them in there. You can see that there's not a whole lot of room we're left with down here. What's probably gonna have to end up happening is, you can see before I trimmed the bumper to fit the intercooler. This is where it was when it was about 1 inch back. More than likely, we're gonna have to chop all of this off. This whole piece is coming off at the top, going to those pieces. I'm thinking some of the inside here might have to be cut as well. I'm gonna mock it all up and then obviously show you guys everything, but it's looking real tight now and there's not too much we can do. All right, guys, so as you can see here, I had to trim the bumper pretty heavily compared to what I did have it as. And I'm still not sure this is even done, but I just figured I'd update you here. Next, I'm gonna mount the intercooler up because I know where it'll fit now, and then just test out and see if this will work. So I ended up having to take a lot of this out because of the intercooler is gonna mount right here. And then I had to take this bar at the bottom out. I just left a little metal that holds this and this together, and then the plastic on the bottom. So there's just that piece of metal that goes through there. These I should have left connected and didn't. So we're gonna see if I'm gonna leave these or if I'm gonna end up cutting that or what's gonna happen. But I'm pretty sure the intercooler will fit if I leave them. So I'm gonna try to keep them. But now I'm just gonna mount up the intercooler, and once I get everything dialed in, I'll show you guys and take measurements. All right, so I got one of the riv-nuts in now, these two here. This is gonna be for the passenger side. This is where the intercooler used to mount to that I had in that other video. This is where it's gonna have to be now. As you can see, it's gonna be a little bit lower, which shouldn't be a problem. And it's obviously further forward because of how big the radiator is. So you are gonna have to remove this. It's two 13mm bolts, they just come right out. This car was pretty rusted when I got it, and there's no corrosion in here, so you guys should have no issue. I'm using M8 by 1.25 thread pitch riv-nuts. And you can see after you put them in and then, you know, tighten them down, they move away from where the hole is here that actually has your bumper mount in. So what you can do is you're gonna have to drill out a lot of this. Like I just took a normal drill bit after I marked where I needed, drilled right in there. And it took a little bit of time, but eventually all this came out. And you can see there's still threads up on there. So it really shouldn't be an issue to still use the bolt that goes in there, even if it's a little jankier than before. And then on the bottom here too, you could see it just kind of like pushed in there with a drill bit, and I got it on this one now. So if you guys watched the other video when I mounted the intercooler up for the first time without the Chase Bays radiator, and you're using the same bracketry that I have here that I made, I'm gonna take from the bottom of the bracket here, that is going to be even with the bottom of the frame rail right here. So the holes are gonna measure out as so. The one hole from the bottom, the starting point is gonna be about 3/4, and then the top hole is gonna be 1 5/8. And from the end of the frame rail to the middle of the bolt, you can see it's gonna be about 7/8. Now I'm just gonna copy this same measurements and everything over onto this side. I already have the 2 little Sharpie marks where I need to go. Get all that done and then mount it up and see how it is. So now I got these 2 in here. This one went in a little nicer actually. There was enough space between where this is and where this is to where I didn't have to drill into this too much. In fact, the threads are still intact. Just on the casing in there, I had to drill a little bit to get this all the way in. And this one didn't poke through the front, it just drilled out. You could see where the bit was right there, kind of bulging out the metal there. So now I'm just gonna fit it up and see how everything is. And just in case you wanted to know, on this side, which is the driver's side, the measurements are still 7/8 in from the edge of the frame rail. And from the bottom, it's gonna be about 7/8 to the middle of the bottom one and 1 7/8 to the middle of the top. Now that difference in measurement is more than likely attributing to the fact as well that I have spacers alternating, where I have 0 down there, 3 over here, and just 1 in the middle, to level this out, as these frame rails just over the years, especially at the end here, they're just not perfectly straight. All right, so here it is, mounted up. I got where I want it right now. The bottom hole on the driver's side works. The top one just needs to be drilled out a hair. And the passenger side is opposite, where the top one is perfect and the bottom one needs to be drilled out a little bit. But it leaves me plenty of clearance, or clearance at all, in between the radiator and the intercooler here. And the radiator, with these fittings on, which we'll get into later, I was just mocking this up, is actually gonna get pushed this way a little bit, which means the bottom is going to come away from the intercooler, so it'll have even a little bit more once these AN lines line up. So that'll be nice. So now I'm going to drill that out and slap the bumper on to see how it fits. All right, guys, so the bumper is slightly mocked up now. It's not connected on the ends. It's just kind of in place at the top. And I do have a fitment issue where these triangles I thought I was going to be able to get away with just don't work on the boots. Both of them hit. Everything else seems to clear just fine. Shouldn't have any issues with any of that. Still get to all the bolts and everything. So what I'm gonna do though is I am gonna just chop this off straight. That way we'll have a full line still at the top, just kind of holding this bumper together, but won't have any really anything to it anymore on the bottom. I also noticed by just bending these out of the way just to see, we're also going to have clearance issues on the edges of the intercooler there. The middle should be all right, but unfortunately we are going to have to trim a little bit more of this. I really didn't want to have to do this because the bumper, it's already completely cut apart, but now we're going to be losing this metal piece that actually holds this plastic to whatever was left of the bumper. That's gonna have to be probably cut on both sides here, probably from here to here. So I'm gonna see how structural that is, or if it might be better to actually take some kind of piece later on and go from a piece that's still standing, come down into the plastic and run it across the bottom here and then back up just to give it some more structural integrity. But we're gonna have to end up cutting those out too. So I've enlarged the holes on my bracket here, and now I should be able to just mount them right up to the new riv nut placement and reconnect all the piping. Hopefully, because we moved it forward about an inch, that this pipe here will still connect with that. This one shouldn't have any problem, but this one on the turbo to intercooler side was a little on the edge before. So we'll see if I have to add another piece to that pipe or not. Now the intercooler's all mounted up, tightened everything down there. This side, this pipe is going to fit no problem. It will go in there. This side, however, though, does have a little gap, and I'm going to have to extend it because this piece here is not cut. I am going to have to extend this aluminum about 3 or 4 inches to get it to seat in there perfectly. Going under the radiator now, you can see that it's close, but it's not touching. And actually, once this gets mounted up with the AN lines, it'll sit a little bit farther back as well. So that looks good on both sides. It's completely away from it. As for measurements from the actual frame of the car there, we have about 2 3/8 to the bracket we made. On this side, it's going to be about the same thing, 2 3/8. And then these, with what's left here to double check, is going to be a little under 1/2 inch. And over here, it's just about 1/2 inch. The next thing we're going to be doing is putting the bumper on. And as you can see, we pretty much trimmed out everything. I tried to go in little sections, and it ended up just being to where you just have to take a bunch of things out. So first off, all up here, these holes are already here, and then you have to extend it out this way into the middle and then mirror it on this side. In here, you're gonna have the fog light area. You're gonna wanna just chop that part out along with where the brake duct would be. The entire middle, as well as shaving down here to where it's just the plastic, not even any metal here anymore. You can leave this support bar up here all the way through, and then same thing mirrored on this side. So for measurements, what it's gonna be is from here to there, it's about 4 inches and about 2.5 over. This diagonal is about 3.5 and another small one at 2. And you end up here at about 1 inch right on top of this line. This whole space from here to there is 7.5 inches. Everything's mirrored on this side, going the opposite direction. And down here, this is stock here, which is at 4 inches, it seems, or it's actually gonna be at 3.5. And then you wanna go all the way down to the bottom of the metal, which is 4, and then the plastic, which is still about 4. From the side over here, kind of right where the thing ends there, about 6 inches in, and then you're going to want to start trailing downwards. The trail is going to be all the way to about 6 3/4 from where you start. And like I said, just cut all of this out and then just mirror that same thing on this side. Here's just a quick shot too of what it looks like from the back. So you guys can see I just chopped pretty much everything out. So it'll clear this intercooler. Now the bumper is back on. I think it does look pretty good, but I do plan on getting a different bumper in the future, one of the plastic ones, and just get rid of all this metal. And hopefully I can trim it up better because I know those sit a little further forward to where I won't need to chop out most of it. But putting the bumper back on, like how we took it off, I have mine set up where it's just 2 screws that screw in from the back with big washers on the back here, as you can see. And then Don't forget to run your blinker wires through the little holes in the bumper. And then there'll also be a screw that I have yet to put back here that holds the fender to the bumper. Here it is on this one. And then same thing with the 2 screws here. Next thing we're gonna do is put the bash bar back on. This looks the same forward and backwards, so upside down or not. So to know if you still have your inserts in, you're gonna want the threaded part at the top, or you could look on the back of the bar. All of the words and everything should be readable. So this would be standard here. As you can see the words, if I was on the other side, you could read them no problem. The easiest way to do this is to just kneel in front of it with this on your lap. Because there's so much play in these blinker wires, it's better to plug them in and then push everything on. So you don't have to reach in there beforehand. And then the big bolts, the 10mm Allens, will go up through the bottom to hold it in. So now the bar is on halfway. I went and plugged everything in like I said, and I put one of these on and then just got this hand tight. So the bolt, again, in from the bottom up through, is just threaded in a little bit right now, as you can see from the top. On the other side, then I like to fit it. This one ended up working out pretty good, where you can see right through it, so the bolt should go pretty well. But remember that if you get one side in and this doesn't line up, the first thing to try is to take a drift, because these top parts here can move around, as you can see, so you can line it up better that way. And if it's still too far, remove one half of this again. You can leave one side in, so you don't have to take everything back off. And then we did remove the actual hangers that hold this part to the chassis. So you might have to undo those bolts and then move that over a little bit to get it to fit. Now that both of those 10mm Allens are in and securing the bash bar on, we can put the covering back on. This just slides right over the top. So now that the cover plate is on, the next thing to do is to secure the sides. What I like to do is drill 2 holes in the plastic here, and then 3 holes in your metal fender down there, and then zip tie through them. So you have a zip tie going through the end hole and the one piece coming through the middle. Same thing on this side, end and end, and then a piece coming through the middle, just to secure it on each side. I also do not have these little lights here active. I removed the wiring for those, so these just sit here, but you'd also need to pop these out and plug them in. And the only reason I secure it this way is just because I find it easier, and the fitment can get a little bit better than using the actual plate that you're supposed to have on here. If you did want to use this, it goes on this way, where the big ends are facing the wheel. And what happens is there's little tabs in here that will slide into these on the top and the bottom, and it's supposed to lock it in place. I haven't had good luck with these, and the bumpers came off a couple times, so I just zip tie it on now. But if you did want to use them, that hole that we used here with the screw coming through, that would go through the top, and then you'd put another hole through the bottom, another screw to secure this on. Next thing to do is going to be to put on the blinker covers there. They're just held in by 2 screws there and there. All right, guys, and then the next thing to do is just to put the grills on. Same thing as before. There's 1 screw in the top of this middle one, and then a screw there and there, mirrored on each side to hold those grills in. So here's how it looks from the front now. Again, I don't think it looks bad. I think, honestly, it did look better before, but now you can see the entire intercooler. Everything's pretty good down there, nothing's hitting. It still looks pretty aggressive, but like I did say, I think I'm gonna get a different bumper soon, one that sticks a little bit further out. And then we'll start running that. But for now, this is pure function. Everything does work, so it should be pretty good. And the next thing we're gonna do is come back up here and finish up actually hooking up the radiator and plug in some holes. The next thing we're going to do is take these 2 little screws that the radiator came with. These are 5 Allen screws, and we are going to put them in this hole in the radiator here, and there's another one down here. I should have done this before, but I wasn't thinking about what I was going to use these for. Originally, I was going to have this as a overflow for this, so like if anything happened, it would come out of here, back up into here. But then I just didn't know how I felt about that, so I think I'm just going to plug them up for now. So to plug them up, you're just going to want to take some seal lock like we used on the part up here with the two sensors in it. Spread some of this on the threads and then just thread them into the radiator. So I'm thinking about it now, and I think I do want to run a port from the overflow here to the top port of the radiator here. So I found this bung I had. I'm going to run this in there with some thread locker and then see how it works. If it doesn't work, I'll plug it up and run something external or just a line to the ground. And if it does work, we're just going to leave it like that. The thread pitch for these little bungs here are M10 by 1.0. So now these are in. Here's my bung here that I just put on, and the other one is plugged up as well. These go all the way in. As you can see, only like one thread is showing, and it's tightened all the way down. In this one, I was able to tighten it all the way down as well. Next, we're going to tackle these two ports here. So the first one that we put on in the back here is going to be this blue one. We're not going to be using the brown one, as this is the one that goes to the gauge in the gauge cluster. And we no longer have that. I'm running an air-fuel ratio gauge there now. So this is just going to hang out. This one, as you can see, will not plug into here. I already had to modify it, as we saw before, just so the prongs can stick out, because it wouldn't work with the intake manifold. So what we're going to do now is actually hack this up. I want to keep just the blue part inside here, and then I'm hoping to be able to take that and shove it on there. So I'm going to cut out right now the actual housing surrounding this whole thing, and then see how that goes. So I was able to get it. It's on there pretty good right now. I chopped off all of the surrounding area. I used a Dremel and then just some cutters just to fine tune it a little bit. Not sure which way it goes, so gonna have to try it out afterwards and then flip it around if we need to. And then I'll probably take some either electrical tape or JB weld or something and just kind of like wrap this up to make it so this won't come out. It's on there pretty tight right now, but it's still a good idea because it's not really made to be like this. If in the future I can find a better solution to this, I will. But for right now, this is how it's going to be. And the other way, or the other thing we're going to do now is hook up this sensor here and plug in the electric water pump all the way down there. So for the electric water pump, as you can see, I have the line hanging off of the bottom of it here. And what I'm going to do is actually run it underneath the alternator and up along here with the alternator lines. I'm going to zip tie it up like this, and then we'll plug it right in to the supplied harness plug here. This I'll reroute back down through there and just plug it in. This is from the other video that I showed going over wiring up the electric water pump and fan harness. And here is the connection for the black connector. So here it is here. All we're gonna do, again, I'm just gonna reroute this line coming up down through there, and then probably run it right along with these, and then just bounce it right up to there. Here's how I have these sensors run now. Just like I said, I got this one, the black sensor coming down, zip tied down to these wires here. My other wires are all zip tied here. I already had them coming through the firewall up there. So I just got them right now zip tied down to this other loom I have, and I'll put some heat wrap over it afterwards. And then here is the plug for the water pump. This just comes out here and then loops up. And the actual water pump wire, like I said, was gonna come down under the alternator. You can see this black wire right here. I have it up and then just connect to the alternator wires and then plugged right in right there. The next step is going to be making the AN lines. So as you can see, we only need to make two. One from the water pump to the actual block, and then one from the head here to the radiator. So this one here is only going to be from right here to right here we're going to measure, and that's going to be a line that is 2.5 inches long. And then we'll put them together, and that'll be the first one I do. To make AN lines, this is 16 AN here in the nylon hose. There's braided underneath. And what I like to do is just start at whatever end they give you. If it's a new line, no reason to have to cut your own there. And then I just measure in where I need, so 2.5 inches here. Put a piece of tape around it, so when we start cutting it, the braids don't like get all messed up over the place. And then put a piece of tape around it, remeasure again where you're going to want to cut. So this is going to be 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to take a saw and just cut right through here. And I always like to start with the hand saw. If that doesn't get through it fast enough or starts leaving a mess, I switch over to an angle grinder. But the hand saw is always the best way to do it. So I got through it here, and what I like doing now is I should have flipped this over because this is the bottom here, and just hit it real quick, but I wasn't thinking about it, went too fast, kind of broke the bottom out here. So I'm just going to take little snips here and just cut some of these pieces off, and we're going to leave the tape on for now, and slide it into the piece. So I cleaned the piece up here, as you can see, and I actually took the tape off of both sides. This piece is so small that it was just easier to do that. The next thing we're going to do is take one of the cleaned up ends, and we're going to push it in all the way to the end of the AN piece here. As you can see on this AN piece, there is a stop right before where the threaded part is at the bottom, and that's what we're going to be trying to get this piece to. All right, so we're like halfway through it now. As you can see, I'm just pushing this in here. Try to get as many of the threads in there as possible, or the braids, because you don't want, it just makes it easier, less resistance. As you can see, that's where the hose is now, and we're trying to get it lined up right with the bottom of the threads right here. So this first piece is all set now. As you can see, I got it right to the threads there. That's what it should look like. And what I like to do, because I don't have any special tools to put these together, is I just put it on the ground, especially for small pieces like this, and then just press down with my hand on the top of it, and then slowly rock it back and forth in each direction until it eventually presses in. If you have a much longer piece like we're going to do for the next one, you're actually going to want to have the end on the ground like this, and then you're going to be holding the piece, pushing it down and moving it around like this. I'll show you that after we make this one. The next step is going to be getting the other end of this line on here. So now we're going to take the other side, do the same thing, and put it over this right here. All right, so here is the piece. It is extremely small, the smallest one I've ever made, definitely. Probably about as small as you can go as well. So first, they are both in there all the way. So what I'm gonna do now is start threading it onto one, thread it onto the other one, and then put both of them on, and then slowly thread them in so it kind of like pulls it equally in doing one of each, because I'm not sure these are actually going to be set like this when we're done. So I got that first AN line made, and then this is all set up now. The measurements we took were perfect. Everything fits exactly how I thought it would. To do it, because it is such a small line in such a tight space, you're going to want to put this one on first and leave this angled upwards like this. Put this one on first and tighten it down a little bit to where this whole unit here can still move back and forth like this. You don't want to go all the way with it. Then you can take and turn this down, push it on there, and start to thread this in. That way, this can go on and this can go on, and they won't bind up. If you try to put this one on first, or tighten this one down all the way. This is at too much of an angle on both of them, and you can't get any of the threads started. But that method works for this one, and it's perfect. I'll also put up on screen now where the actual AN line is in the cylinder here, because it wasn't pushed down all the way to get the clearance. So I'll have that on screen now showing where to put the actual line inside of the tube. The next thing we're going to do is for the other AN line, take the caps off and then take our measurement again. This one, it's going to be about 13.25. So I'm extending my boost pipe now. This is from the turbo down, and because we moved the intercooler an inch forward, I am now severely lacking on this part here where the rubber boot connects to. So what I'm going to do is add a 3.5-inch extension onto this, and then I'll do the measurements after it's all welded to show you guys again. But basically it's just going to extend it a little bit to put it back into that boot. All right, so here is the piece all welded up. I didn't do a super great job welding it, but it's all together and there's no leaks anywhere that I can see, like any pinholes or anything. So like I mentioned, this piece is 3.5 inches. And I overlapped it onto this pipe about 1/4 inch. So from the bend now to the end is about 5.75 inches. Now I'm just going to clean this up and we'll put it back on the car. And here it is all set up. As you can see, the extension worked out perfect there. And it's still just hooked right up to the turbo there with that V-band. And it goes right into the intercooler just like we have it now. So that worked out perfectly. All right, so the only thing left to do now is to attach a 1/4 inch hose from here to our other barb I have down here. Originally, this was a 3/8 hose with this bung in there. But the other barb I used was 1/4 inch, and I happen to have one of these. So I'm just going to make the whole thing 1/4 inch, and this is again for the overflow. And the thread pitch for these, there's a hole here, the overflow hole, and another hole here is an M10 by 1.0 thread pitch. All right, guys, so I'm just doing some testing now. What's really nice about this water pump is because it's electric and you can just wire it up to turn on. I just have the car in accessory mode and everything is working. You can kind of hear it. It's pretty quiet. Temporary fill there. You could see in here because, you know, it's not getting hot or anything. Pop the cap off. See the coolant in there. So what I'm looking for now is I had a little leak, which is why I have the timing cover off. And I recommend taking this back off again. You just undo the bolts and then this whole thing can pop off. Put a piece of rag under the head and the block here. And if that starts to get wet, you have a leak out of here and these bolts need to be tightened down. I had to tighten them down 2 more times and now they're so tight that I'm afraid I'm going to strip them out. But I've had it running now for about 2 minutes and no little leak. You'll see if this is a clean rag, this will get all wet right here. And if that is where it's leaking, what'll happen is down here, right in there, you can kind of see where some of the water was. It'll start pooling up on a thing down there, which may lead you to believe that it's actually the Stim Tech mount. And I tightened all these down again. None of those needed to be tightened. And now I no longer have a leak down there. So if you're getting a leak down there and you see it pooling up, check this, but also be wary of this and do the rag test. And so far, so good. All right, guys, so it's been a long time since I recorded the last clip in this video. It's now early October, and I've been driving the car around with this setup. I have a couple 100 miles on it. It's super nice. It cools everything so well. I've been running it at about 165 degrees, just seeing if it'll stay down there, and it keeps it like that, no problem. We did have a couple hot days back in September when I finished this up, and it was about 85 degrees outside, and this was chilling at the 165. When you do let it sit and idle, it does creep up to like 185 to about 190. I never saw anything over 200, which was pretty nice. The stock one would have been right up to like 220, 235. So as you can see, like we have everything ran, nothing has changed. I do have a leak from this actual fitting, like right where this part is, like the actual AN fitting itself is leaking. So I'm gonna have to replace this, but it's nothing to do with any of the hose layout. And then the valve here that I have, this little brass piece that goes into the overflow, is leaking as well. I switched this to Teflon tape from the sealant we used everywhere else. And that did not seem to fix it, so I'm gonna have to keep playing with this and figure out what is wrong. So I just have towels wrapped around these, but you can drive the car no problem like that. Everything else is fine. There's no leaks in this bottom line, no leaks on the Stim Tech plate. And this leak, after I tightened everything down and then let it run for a little while, totally went away. So like I said, leak checking it with just the valve on is super nice. As for putting everything back together, just do the opposite of how we took everything apart. Goes right back together, no problem, especially if you labeled all your spark plug wires here. And everything else just fits up. This was a belt that Stim Tech provided with this plate. I forgot if I mentioned that in the video, but those come as a kit, so you can run the water pump delete and just run the alternator. And other than that, everything else has been perfect. So here I am now in the car. Here is where I have the module mounted to. We went over this in the wiring video. And this, it's super nice having it here. I really do like it. Everything, you can see everything's super nice. There's nothing in the way of the cluster up here anymore, and I got the air fuels in there, so I don't have to have the coolant temp. This is really nice. The only thing I recommend is having it on alarm off. If you have it on, it will always have the alarm on no matter how over your coolant range you want it. So I have mine at 165. As soon as it hits 175, which is 10 over, it turns the alarm on and doesn't stop. And that's super annoying when you like are sitting around idling and it just kind of bumps up. So I just leave it off, and it's just the click of a switch if you like want to go on the track or something and have it on so you know. But I just recommend leaving that off. So I'll cycle the car on now so you guys can see. So I just turned the car on and everything's booting up. You can hear it flow in the water now. It should pick that up. You can see it has battery voltage on there as well, which is super nice. Car actually isn't on a tender right now, so the battery voltage is a little low. The water pump is running, and the fan right now is activated, but it's not running. Once this starts blinking, you know it's running, and it won't do that until the water temp gets up. Here are the instructions for this pump, and all you really do is hold the set button here to cycle between Fahrenheit and Celsius, and you just hit the button to see what your desired water temperature is, and then you can just hit it a bunch of times to whatever you want, and then when you want it there, you just hold it down, and it says setting temperature, and then you're all set. And if you hit it again, it'll come up to where you were, and this goes all the way up to, I believe, 230, and as low as 105. Yep, so right there, and then you just go all the way back up to where you want it. So I'm going to put mine at 165. And here we go. I went and set it to 167. So I was going to do 165, but figured why not go a little higher. So, and you can see too, by holding the button down, you can turn the fan on, the water pump's on. So everything does work to plan. I'm very happy with the results, and I'm really happy with how everything runs and how the only leaks that I have are very easy to solve, and there aren't actually anything major. I was pretty worried about that, especially using two parts that I haven't really seen anybody else use too much. I don't have any driving video, but I do have a video of the car idling with this setup So I'll throw that at the end here and any other clips I can find. But other than that, that might be the end of the videos for this year, especially like with taking it out and doing that kind of stuff. We're already into October, and this car usually gets put away pretty early because there's no heat or anything in it, and it's kind of a pain to drive unless it's nice out. So I'll probably just be doing some other work to it. I do plan on doing fuel system work this winter. I also plan on having some videos on the M4 coming soon. This video took forever to make, and I'm sure it's probably like 3 or 4 hours long. I tried to cover everything in as much depth and detail as possible. I know towards the end here, kind of skipped out on putting everything back together, but I just really wanted to get it done and enjoy it. And then I just did not feel like recording it. So if you have any questions about anything, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer anything. Just leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.